Yes, hello, hello. Marcus here, and thrilled to be coming at you live and supporting you guys via this uh, Facebook Live pop-up class on DiSC, or Human Behavioural Profiling. So last Thursday, or a couple of Thursdays ago actually, I ran my behavioural code training. So this is a training I run 3 times per year. I've done the last one for this year. We'll be doing 3 more next year. And good day, Janaea. It's lovely to see you and lovely to have you on the call. Guys, give me some likes, give me some love. Let me know that you can see me okay. That would be fantastic. Throw up a comment and we can go along there. Good day, Maxine. I can see you're here on the call as well, which is sensational. Good day, Matt. Fantastic to have you along as well. Brilliant that you've just joined. So give us some likes, give us some love. I'll try and wave with you and interact with you. Good day, Gary. It's fantastic to have you along. If you've got any questions, make sure you ask them. So this particular pop-up class proves to be a rich opportunity for both people who are at the training. Jason Burnsy is here. Burnsy, you're looking after 7 kids. Well, your other half is, flamboyantly jet-setting away in the island somewhere. Aren't you a man of measure? Hey, it's Tracy Ballard from the 21 Day Safe Self-Love. Great to have you on the call, Tracy, as well. Thank you, guys, for those of you who are sharing some comments and letting me know. Danielle Bryant, a very much cherished and long-time friend, is on the call as well. Danny, great to have you here also. So this pop-up class, Johnny Nichols, the man, the myth, the legend, the Coffs Harbour legend himself. Great to have you here. So this class provides a rich opportunity for both those people who were at the behavioural code training a couple of Thursdays ago, because it's going to give them an opportunity to ask some questions and to share with me what they've road tested, what they've put into practice, to hit me up with some questions, some prickly bits. You know, Marcus, I tried this bit did work, this bit didn't work. I fell over and skunned my knees here, but then I picked myself off, dusted myself off, and here I've been able to go on. Dave Whiteside, great to have you on the call as well. Thank you for your commentary. So it provides a rich opportunity for those who were at the behavioural code training last Thursday, and it provides a very rich opportunity for those who weren't, because you can start to learn about the science that is human behavioural profiling. And first, why would you want to learn about human behavioural profiling? Why would you want to learn about DiSC? DiSC just being the D, the I, the S, and the C energy. Karen Thompson, long time no speak. Fantastic to have you along. And Jesse Kingsbury, brother from another mother, lovely to have you here as well. Well, because if you learn about human behavioural profiling, 2 things are guaranteed to happen. One, you are going to have a deeper, richer, more meaningful relationship with yourself, because you're going to get a clue, a understanding as to how you tick and to how you... so here's your behaviour on the surface, and here it is bubbling along on the surface. What's going on underneath? What's driving up from underneath the behaviour that you're seeing on the surface? Because if you're just watching the surface level behaviour, life can be a little bit confusing. You're watching all this stuff turn up, you're watching all this stuff show up in your world, and it can be a little tricky to identify, well, what drove this behaviour to the surface? Why did it show up? Selena, lovely to have you on the call as well. Someone with your career would love human behavioural profiling, and I'm pretty confident you'd know plenty about it already. So it helps you understand the behaviour, the surface level behaviour that's bubbling away, where it comes from. And in this way, you develop a more intimate relationship with yourself. Now, understanding the word intimate, into me I see, intimacy, into me I see, intimacy. So you can develop more intimacy with yourself, which is sensational. Christine, you did let me know earlier in the week you'd be on the call. It's lovely to have you here as well. So you develop this intimacy with yourself. So therein lies a tremendous amount of power already. Critically, though, it doesn't stop there, because you're also able to develop a ton of additional intimacy in terms of an intimate working understanding of your loved ones, whether that be your children. Now, Aiden and Emmett, my little fellows, they are only 11 months in the world, and I'm pretty confident I've already sussed out their DiSC profiles, which is tremendously beneficial in me fathering them. Have I locked this in? Of course I haven't. Am I flexible to it changing tomorrow or next week or the day after? Of course. However, at the moment, one of them is very, very, very quintessential I, and the other is very, very, very quintessential S. And knowing this, it tells me exactly how to father them in a way that they are going to love well, they are loving and responding to with tremendous joy and warmth and appreciation. Because again, it's understanding this. There is a macro pattern in the human existence and there is micro patterns that sit underneath that macro pattern. The macro pattern is every human being on the planet wants to feel valued, respected, appreciated, and known. It's a no-brainer. Every human being on the planet wants to feel those things, but the way in which they feel those things is completely different. Completely. The S energy will feel valued, respected, appreciated, and known in a completely different way to which the opposing quadrants, so the quadrants that are on diagonals are the most opposing, in a completely different way in which the D energy quadrant will feel that. So guys who were there last Thursday, if you've got any questions, make sure you put them up in the comments. I can see the comments coming through and I'll be more than happy to answer those questions for you specifically. So what does a behavioural code day look like? What does a DiSC behavioural profiling session look like? Well, the first thing that happens with the participants is you get into the room and we hand out these cards, and the cards have personality traits. And where this is interesting is you see people trading off traits so that they end up in their deck with the traits that they most strongly identify with. And then later in the day, they actually get a DiSC report. Now, they've answered tons and tons of questions before they come, and then those questions and the answers to those questions provide them with a DiSC report, and that report shows them their energetic shading. Nikki Kingston-Davies, good day, great to have you on the call. This is something that would be killer for you in your business. So it provides them with an energetic shading. It tells them where they are when they're on autopilot. Now, understanding this is not about boxing people in. It's not personality profiling. Personality profiling tends to say there are 16 personalities, you have this personality blend, and that's you. It can pigeonhole people, and it can be very limiting because people, you'll hear them respond in such a way, oh, look, that's just not me, that's just not my nature, it's just not my personality. Where DiSC or behavioural profiling or energy is different is it doesn't say that. What it says is, here's you, here's the quadrant that you most commonly hang out in when you're on autopilot. However, if you choose to exercise behavioural flexibility, you will be able to flex from that quadrant to a quadrant of your choice. And the cool thing is, no quadrant is better than any other. So the D quadrant, the eagle quadrant, dominance, decisive, direct, disciplined, all about results and outcomes, is not better than its opposing quadrant, the S quadrant, the dove quadrant, soft, subtle, gentle, stable, steady. It's all about connection, and it's all about the glue that binds. So it's not better, but each quadrant is definitely better for a certain situation. So key distinction, no quadrant is better overall, but each quadrant is better for a certain situation. So us doves, we can learn a lot by how the eagles go about certain aspects of life and living, and we can choose to behaviourally flex into that space when we recognise that it serves us. Another key distinction here, it's never about being inauthentic. It's never about pretending, and it's never about bullshitting yourself or anyone. It's about remaining authentic to you, authentic to your soul, authentic to your essence, and choosing to be flexible in your communication. And something I always say when people talk about inauthenticity, good day Grace, absolutely lovely to have you along. Susanna Hatch, great to have you here too. Something I always say about people when they talk about inauthenticity, but Mark, if I'm being behaviourally flexible, how am I doing that and staying authentic to myself? And the way I answer that is find the truth in you that's relevant to them. So you will have a truthful part of you that can relate very readily to that quadrant, even though it's not where you normally hang out. And that's the key ingredient to authentically being able to match. And life, the human experience, if it's not about connection, then what is it about? Connection to yourself, connection to your loved ones, connection to your clients. Now, understanding this behavioural code is helping people, yes, with selling, but also in life in general. How does it help with selling? Well, I guess it's pretty obvious by now. If you can read and relate to another human being on a more connected level, and you can cut through all the noise and immediately be treating them just as they would like to be treated, because understanding sales has never been about you, never will be about you, it's about them. So you can treat them how they would like to be treated. You've cut through the noise, you've gotten maximum traction, and you are experiencing a level of connection that's deeper, richer, and more vital than you would if you're just playing guesswork. One of the most powerful things that came out of the training was one of the participants saying, I love that I have a blueprint now. I love that I'm not guessing. I'm paraphrasing here, of course. But basically, they had been having their sales conversations pretty much a similar way to all the target audience, which meant that sometimes they would have been hitting the mark, but sometimes they would have been missing the mark, and they were never sure whether they were hitting or missing, so it was a little confusing. What becoming educated in human behavioural profiling does, or DiSC energy does, it allows you to understand the behavioural code that's playing out underneath the surface of your interactions, which means you don't have to guess. Good day, Louise. Lovely to have you here as well. Guys, put up a comment, ask questions. My time here tonight is only well spent if I'm specifically serving you guys. So if you've got any questions at all, I'm very happy to answer them. Throw them up in the comments and I'll make sure I get to them. So, yeah, it provides a level of richness that's pretty profound. Intimacy, intimacy with yourself, intimacy with your loved ones, and then with your client, the ability to just cut through all the noise, treat them precisely how they want, and to have this blueprint of how to conduct yourself in a sales interaction or in any human interaction before the interaction starts, man, it puts you ahead of the game. And that's why it's so powerful. I shared with the attendees in the room that I sold homes for 6 years, and during that time I was able to utilise this to great effect, because Mr. and Mrs. Buyer would have differing ways in which they liked to be treated, and it was so critical to be able to match in with Mrs. Buyer and just how she likes to go about a decision as she contemplates building a home. And equally important, it was critical to match in with Mr. Buyer and how he likes to go about a decision when building a new home. And so this is what the human behavioural profiling does. And one of the cool things that we did is we talked about science and spirit. And so here it got a little bit woo-woo. But to me, this is a critical ingredient, because what I find fascinating is if you look at the world of spirituality and you understand, hey, Jacqueline, lovely to have you on the call. If you look at the world of spirituality and you understand that all the mystics, all the sages, all the gurus, all the lords, since the beginning of time, yes, have said different things. Yes, have said things that are different. But there is common wisdom. In other words, there is certain wisdom that runs across all of them, that they've all been saying since way back when. And historical common wisdom is current day affirmation. So I'll say that to you again. Historical common wisdom is current day affirmation. So when the greatest minds of our time have historically all been saying the same thing, then we can allow that to give us a tremendous amount of comfort in the now moment. And from a spiritual point of view, it's this idea that we are all the same, and as uniquely different as we are all the same. So there's a thing in the world called a dichotomy. A dichotomy is it's either this or that. G'day, Jesse. Lovely to have you along, mate. It's either this or that. There's a dichotomy. It has to be this or that. And a lot of people, and you notice it with the questions I get asked in my training rooms. People come into the training with a lot of dichotomy in their thinking. They'll say things like, oh, but it can't be this because it's that. And so the idea that paradoxically it can actually be this and that is often just outside of the current awareness. Whereas the truth is there are very few dichotomies, and many things are both this and that. So, as human beings, we are all different in that we are completely unique. We have our own individual DNA. And we are all the same in that everything is energy. Energy is everything. So science says E equals mc squared. Energy is matter. And that's how we come to find that. And spirituality says the same thing, that we come from one source, one essence, one everything. And then that often comes down through characters, so Jesus, Krishna, Muhammad, Buddha, etc. And then the human being. And the human being can go through the character to get to the overarching source, or it doesn't have to. It can just go straight to the overarching source. And this is very, very powerful. And we come from source, and then, that source resides within us. And science backs this up. So Danielle Bryant is saying, yeah, I love it. It can be all and many. It can, and it can be nothing and everything. Very, very powerful, guys. Throw up a comment. Share with me questions that you may or may not have. And so what I love about this is science and spirit are coming from two different angles and saying the same thing. That on a very, very, very core level, so the deepest, richest, most fundamental level, we are the same. And then as you start to add layers on top of that core level, so we are all energy, we are all on a molecular structure, we're the same, and it's just the molecules are heading in different directions at different speeds. And say the D energy molecules, they are heading in a powerful direction, in a very dominant direction, a very decisive direction, and at speed. And then you contrast that with the S energy molecules, which are softer, more gentle, heading in a more gentle direction at a gentler speed, which gives us our unique character that is perfectly unique to just us and no one else on the planet that is like us. So here we find that on a core deep level we are the same and we are different. So just checking in with some questions here. Hey Marcus, at what point during the sales process do you determine what energy your client is? What are you looking for to assess if you have ever got it wrong? So great question, Matt. So at the point in the sales process, if it's face-to-face interaction, you're immediately looking for their body language, how they are walking to you, the pace with which they are approaching. As you shake their hand, you're getting a feel for how quickly they're protruding their hand, how strongly they're gripping your hand. All of these are absolute dead giveaways as to their energetic profile, which is really nifty. And then as they start talking, human beings will reveal themselves to you quickest via the questions they ask. So the biggest tell of the human being is the questions we ask. So the C energy, the owl energy, the compliant, correct energy, will ask lots and lots of questions about specific detail, thereby revealing themselves. The D energy will ask lots and lots of questions about results and outcomes. And of course, the I energy will ask a different style of questions again. And this is a great way of telling. If it's over the phone, Matt, which I suspect at least half of your interactions would be, half of your sales interactions would be, then the best way to tap in is through tone. So close your eyes, get really, really tuned into the tone. The best way to remember this is over the phone, I concentrate on tone. Over the phone, I concentrate on tone. Understanding that in the NLP model of communication, so John Grinder and Richard Bandler started neurolinguistic programming in the 70s, and it's a huge science, and it's the thinking that goes on underneath the thinking. And they researched thousands and thousands of communicating geniuses, and they figured out that tone is 5 times more powerful than words. So over the phone, you are missing someone's physiology, obviously. You have their words, which is 5 times less important. You have their tone. And the D energy will have a stronger, more determined tone. The S energy, a softer, more gentler tone. The I energy will have a tone full of pop and spice and bubble and variety. And the C energy will have a much more slower, much more measured, much more correct tone. And so that is your biggest giveaway. I trust that helps. But if you've got any other questions around that, make sure you ask. And also, Matt, I think you asked, how do you assess if you've got it wrong? The key thing here is to be playful with it and be willing to pivot and course correct. So sometimes you'll be halfway through an interaction and you'll think to yourself, yeah, I reckon this is what I've got in front of me, this style of human being, and you'll start engaging with them, and you'll quickly find out that nah, not so fast. And that happens to me still occasionally to this day. And so here we want to have behavioural flexibility so that we can pivot, we can course correct, and we can adjust on the fly. And this is why it's so playful, and this is why it's so fun. And what I always say is the human behavioural code is playing out whether you know about it or not. So there is no question whether it's playing out. There is no question. It's just, do I know about it? And if you choose to become educated on it, you can then know about it, which means you can then leverage it to your advantage and to their advantage, because understanding you never learn any of this unless your primary mandate is for the greater good. So is it good for me, good for others, and good for the greater good? So you knowing this stuff is going to best benefit you and them because you're going into your interactions to advantage the greater good. So the human behavioural code is playing out whether you know about it or not. You may as well get educated on it so that you can be savvy to it. Pardon the pun. Okay, so just got a couple of other questions. So this is from some of the guys who were in the training on Thursday. Marcus, can you give us an example of a leading question for each of the DiSC behavioural styles? Okay, that's from Maxine. Great question, Maxine, and thank you for your question. So a leading question for, say, the D behavioural style would be, I'm curious when it comes to our dealings, what's the outcome that you're looking for? Because you're tapping straight into their primary driver of results and outcomes. For the I energy, hey, I'm curious, where have you seen this before that's made you curious about it? So we went into the example of someone buying a bathing suit, which is not what Maxine sells or anything close to it, but the question that person would ask is, hey, where have you seen this worn before? What do you love? And it's all about tapping into their sense of visual enticement. But the sort of thing that you sell, Maxine, you would be curious to know, is there people of influence in their life that have embarked upon this sort of training before, or that embarked upon this sort of mission before? For the S energy, it's always about connection, and a phenomenal leading question would be to understand which type of connection is their primary driver. So is it connection to their tribe? Is it connection to themselves? Is it connection to a greater movement? All sorts of things. So you're going to ask a leading question around connection, and then of course for the C energy, a great question for them is there any other information you require to feel satisfied today? So I'll say that again, it's a cracker for the owl energy, the C energy. Is there any other information you require to feel satisfied today? Jason Burns, Burnsy, again, this man deserves a medal. Seven kids, and Kate just off gallivanting, mate, unbelievable. No, Kate's a legend as well, we know that. So Jason says, love the awareness now. Yeah, cool. Very funny sometimes, playing with how to communicate when you determine what people are. And what I love about Burnsy there is he said playing with, because that's what it's all about. It's just being playful. Sometimes people come into the training and they get a bout of terminal seriousness about it. And it's almost like they furrow their brow and try and concentrate all the harder to gather the information. But this is actually the antithesis of getting this, because the way to get it is to feel into it. So it's kind of counterintuitive, particularly for say the owl energy in a human being. But Burnsy, I think you did have a bit of that C energy, but Burnsy is saying that he's feeling into it, being playful with it, which is great. Matthew Hart's another one who uses the term playful. Michelle Steens from Fine Point Real Estate, lovely to have you. Kathy Walker, City Greater Geelong, thank you for joining us, lovely to have you as well. Hey Kathy Gray and Nashi, great to have you guys on the call. So it's about being playful with it. It's about making a read, just as you would say in a game of cards or any other game, and not taking yourself too seriously, not taking your read too seriously, and being able to flex and flow accordingly. So thank you guys for the questions. I'm just scrolling down. I can't see any more questions at this point, but there is a good number of folks on the call. We've got 15 on the call at the moment. So if you do have a question, feel free to ask, because then I can tailor the rest of the content that we cover specifically to you. So Carl Jung talks about the shadow self. Carl Jung is a Swedish psychiatrist that came to prominence in the 1920s and credited with many, many things. And he talks about this idea of the shadow self. Any strength overplayed is a weakness. Any strength overplayed is a weakness. And so for, let's say you've got an Olympic athlete and he's dominant, decisive, direct and disciplined, that's fantastic. However, if that strength is overplayed, it can lead to a sacrificial life where any type of enjoyment is put on hold, and then there can be, say, the person entering into their 40s and having a midlife crisis. Just sort of spitballing here, but that's what I mean. The dove energy, gentle, considerate, thoughtful, sensitive. These are great things, but if overplayed, they can lead to a massive dose of victim mentality. Oh, I did all of this for you, and then you couldn't even insert victim story here. And I say this as a dove. So it's not having a go, it's just it is what it is. So we talked about that on the training as well. And I guess we talked about too why it's very much a reduction in frustration. I'm just occasionally looking at my notes here, guys. Why it's an occasional reduction in frustration. when you can get this science down, because you're not hit and miss. You know, a sales conversation or any human interaction, if you don't know what you don't know, then you're going to get imperceptible random results. Imperceptible random results. So that's what you want to avoid, and you can avoid it by getting educated on the person that's standing in front of you and you yourself. So Jessie Malthouse is on the call. Jessie's asking, the question I ask to dig deeper into what they want from yourself. The question to ask to dig deeper into what they want from yourself. In sales type of situation especially, if you're wanting to build rapport to get the on your side. Okay, so as soon as you, I think I know what you're asking, Jessie, not 100%, but I do think I know. You'll soon let me know if I'm errant here. You'll be able to enter their map as you speak in a way that's meaningful to them. So once again, in the D quadrant, you are going to enter their map as soon as you start talking about results and outcomes. With the I quadrant, you're going to enter their map as soon as you start talking about, and this will build rapport. Rapport is in common with. The best way I break down the word rapport is in common with. So some people talk about it as a state of liking, but it's about liking based on that which is in common with. So when you are in common with another person, typically there is phenomenal rapport. And so what you want to be able to do, hey Jen, lovely to have you on the call as well. So what you want to be able to do is enter the person's map, results and outcomes for the D, as we've said. For the I, you want to understand what popular throw of life, what popular opinion, what popular movement has really brought them to where they are now with this conversation, with this part. And so you want to be able to get sort of clear on that. The S energy, and Maxine, I think you wanted a bit more data on the S energy. You will enter their map wildly as soon as you start talking about connection. So Jessie, too, you're asking about how to build rapport rapidly. You're going to do that through talking about connection. And once again, people mistake, people that aren't this way inclined and don't make the buying decisions like this, think that it's stunning that anyone would make a buying decision based on connection. But guess what? I know a bloke who spent 55 grand on a BMW because he had a phenomenal connection with the car salesman. I know this person really well, and it's a true story, and it did happen. So understand that they will forego the best price, they will forego the quickest service delivery, they will forego a lot of things that the other quadrants regard as really important if there is a sensation of true and deep connection. So Maxine, leading questions to the S energy would be diving deep into their motivation, their deep motivation for being here in this space and considering this opportunity with you, okay? Because then you're going to be tapping into their key driver of connection. Nashi says, I can't hear, but it's his end, not mine. Okay, that's helpful, Nashi. Thank you for letting me know. So if he's in a sales meeting, he'll check that out later. G'day, Kate. Lovely to have you along. So Danielle Bryant, this is powerful and resonates. Thanks, Danny. Appreciate that. An overplayed strength creates frustration, much like standards being too high because there are no equal standards. That's really true. And the perfectionist pattern, this is a pattern that's very, very common with the C energy, the owl energy. The perfectionist pattern, now I know there was someone on the call earlier that I've already spoken to about this because I feel like it's something that may be playing out in their life and perhaps causing them a lot of struggle that does not need to be there. The perfectionist pattern is something that is a huge barnacle to those of us who choose to run this pattern. Now understand, none of us are a perfectionist person, okay? We are just people that run a perfectionist pattern. There's a huge, huge difference. The second one is very liberating. The former one is an entrapment. So there's no person I would say you are a perfectionist, but there are many people that I would say I notice you're running at times a perfectionist pattern. And the perfectionist pattern, which is particularly beholden to the C energy, the owl energy, that is going to have you feeling trapped and under quite a burden because no one, it's interesting, one of my mentors talks about the perfectionist standards being no standard whatsoever. Now that sounds like a hugely contradictory thing, but it's kind of not really, because if your standard is so high that it's impossible to reach, then it's actually no standard. A standard is something that you are going to stand for. And if you're choosing a standard, what you're going to stand for, and you can't stand for it, then it is no standard. So it's about, another one of my mentors talks about becoming addicted to imperfect action. And all of the truly successful people I know do run with this mantra as a key ingredient of their success. It's becoming addicted to imperfect action and understanding that you will often take action without all the ducks lined up, because you've lined up enough of them and you've tapped into how this feels, and there's a good enough blend of logic and emotion within you, and you will choose to drive forward with the behavior based on that. So if you are on the call and if you feel like you're a little bit of an owl, hey, Jeanette Hodgkinson, you are a legend. Thank you for coming on the call. If you are an owl and if you feel like you could be a bit of a C energy, and then there's a good chance you're running a perfectionist pattern. And if you are, it's going to be a very exhausting thing for you, because you're just setting a benchmark. And the thing is, the standards which we judge others with are the standards we judge ourselves with. It's just a truth of human behavior. So if you are holding yourself to a perfectionist standard, guess what? Yeah, you'll be holding those you interact with to that same perfectionist standard, which means you'll be missing your own mark and everyone will be missing your mark, and you'll be in a semi-constant state of frustration, wondering why the world is so full of buffoons that just can't get it right. Kath Gray says, addicted to imperfect action, needed to be reminded of this, thank you. You're very, very welcome, Kath. When I first started my coaching journey, I did an 18-month degree in human behavioural science called a Credentialed Advanced Practitioner of Coaching. And I soon saw that some of the students were just getting stuck. They were like a couple of pages into their knowledge paper and stuck. Vanessa Medling, good day. Lovely to have you. They were getting into their knowledge paper and just stuck. They were getting into their first coaching session and just stuck. They were having their first negative experience with a client and stuck. They were unsure of email processes or CRM systems or whatever, and they're just getting stuck. Chris Longley, Vic, good day. Lovely to have you guys tuning in. Getting stuck because they didn't have all the ducks lined up. They weren't 100% sure they were going to be correct. I once had someone in my training room, and I asked this gentleman an incredibly simple question. Now, this gentleman had a high level of owl energy in him, like he was a C energy off the charts. He couldn't answer the question. He couldn't answer the question because he wasn't 100% sure he was going to be correct. And unless he knew for sure he was going to be correct, he wasn't willing to venture a step. So he would rather stay in a place of stuckness as opposed to venturing a step. Interesting. Really, really interesting. And this is what the perfectionist pattern does. It's devastating. It really is. And when we choose instead to become addicted to imperfect action, what happens is we are constantly moving forwards, and sometimes we move forwards, a couple of degrees off course this way. Sometimes we move forward a couple of degrees off this way, but we're forging our own path, and we're not waiting around on other people. We're not being heavy and needy and burdensome on other people. We are marching and moving, and this is something that can be seen as leadership, and this is something that other people can follow. So thank you guys for the questions which are coming through thick and fast still. I would continue to encourage you to ask your questions because then I can continue to tailor this class to you. Jesse's asking any books. Jesse, I don't have any go-to books on this. Me personally, I chose to go to a training. I chose to absorb that training for all it was worth, and then I chose to get my own profile done and then deliver the training. And that's what was the secret of my success when it came to this. And this to me is something that needs to be experiential learning. So when you receive this information based on a book, I believe it loses nearly all of its cut through. When you receive this information based on training, you then get to experience the learning. At the end of my day's training, there was 13 participants. I asked for a survey to be filled out. What was your key takeaway? And a lot of people signaled the role play in the training, because what we do in the training is we inhabit the I energy, we inhabit the S energy, we inhabit the D, and we inhabit the C, and we spend time with us inhabiting these archetypes, these quadrants of human behavior, which then allows us to relate to other people on a very organic and authentic level. And that is the way to nail this. So get your ass to some training, I would say, and I know you're someone who does like to invest in yourself. I don't know any books on the topic. If you can't get yourself to some training, there will be some great YouTube stuff I'm sure that you could find. Maxine shares, this is really helpful. Thank you. Maxine, you're incredibly welcome. Maxine, for those who don't know, has got a book launch coming up in a week or two time, and myself and a couple of my buddies are going along and looking really forward to that. Maxine's a genius in the leadership space, particularly around schools. So if there's anyone else on the call, you might want to connect with Maxine around that. So this is the sort of stuff we covered. Just waiting on some other questions to come through, guys. If you've got some questions, I'd encourage you to sing out. Otherwise, just bear with me for the top of my head for a sec while I just have a look at the running sheet. Scones I've got here on the running sheet because we broke the scones. That was a highlight of the day. I'm sure we can all agree on that. So we've talked about being the same and different. And this, guys, is so critical. Understanding that at the very basic level, we are the same. And, of course, once we start adding layers, a layer of DNA, a layers of personality, a layers of behavioural and energetic makeup, that's where the differences start to come in. And getting familiar with these differences is, and getting familiar with the hilarity that is the human experience. I read this quote once that said, we're all pretty effed up, and those who don't think they are the ones that are really effed up, because to a degree, all of us have this shadow self. All of us have these muddly, trip over, stumble around and bump into things, aspects to ourselves. And if we can make peace with these aspects, if we can learn to enjoy and even be in love with these aspects, then we don't suffer from terminal seriousness, which means we don't project that into our environment, which means the world is a much more playful and light place, and it can be much more readily enjoyed. So, any questions, guys? Just flicking down. Can't see any other questions coming through, guys. If you've got questions, this is a rare opportunity for you to pick someone's brains, and I will happily go there and answer them with you. Any tips? Does someone on the call want to know how to read their child? Does someone on the call want to know how to relate better to their mother? I have had clients come to the behavioural code training, which of course is based on lots of things, but helping them sell, and they have thumped the table with vigour and said, oh my God, I just worked out my mother. And the passion with which this person said this was gold. They had gotten such a great takeaway from the training simply because they had found their mother infuriatingly frustrating for 27 years. Their words, not mine. And they had several epiphanies and aha moments in the training that just helped them get where mum had been coming from all these 27 years. Pretty powerful stuff. Kath Gray. Kath, I love the participation. Marcus, could you please say more about stepping into energies that we don't inhabit often and how this is different to acting as if? Oh, I love this question. So Kath's question is a cracker. Kath's question is, can I share more about inhabiting other people's energies rather than acting as if? This is a pivotal question. It comes up in every single training, as well it should, because we always want to be authentic. I talk about true naked essence a lot. My belief is that we all have a mandate to find our true naked essence and then behave from our authentic, organic, true naked essence as often as possible. What's our true naked essence? It's the us that exists beyond the masks. It's the us that exists beyond the self-constructed layers of the personality. It's the true and actual us. So Kat's asking a phenomenal question. She's saying, if I learn this stuff around behavioural styles, how do I be true to that and be over here at the same time? And the answer of this comes from a sentence. It comes from an example of nature, and it also then comes from a sentence. So I want to cover both of those for you. The example of nature is the chameleon. So the chameleon is able to change colour to adapt better to its environment. It does not change its blood. It does not change its soul. It does not change its essence, its flesh, or anything that is important about it. It changes the surface-most, outermost part of it and how it presents itself to the world in order to better adapt to its environment. So it's still being an authentic chameleon. It's just adjusting its outer layer to better serve the environment that it's with. So Jesse, great question. I'll get to that in a sec. So the chameleon, nature as ever, gives us our cues. You want to a lot about the human experience, sit and look at nature every opportunity you get, because all the clues are there. So the chameleon's phenomenal in this way. The other thing that I want to say to you, Kath, is find the truth in you that's relevant to them. So, for example, I myself can lack a lot of C energy, which is that real attention to detail. And I can find it quite frustrating if I'm with someone who's demanding from me a lot of detail. So they might be asking me what I would classify as very specific, minute questions about very down in the detail stuff. And if I allow myself to cruise on my autopilot, I will start to feel frustrated by that. But there is a truth in me that in certain environments, I myself care enormously about the details. I remember when my fiance was, she was in hospital and she was getting something done, and I was asking the surgeon some questions, and he was answering me in a vague way. Boy, oh boy, was I passionate about the details in that conversation, and did I hold him to account to deliver those details to me in that conversation? So I have a part of me that's completely and utterly passionate about the most minute details, given the right circumstances. So now, if someone is coming at me with that energy or that behavioural style, I'm able to very truthfully and organically match with that by just recognising that there's a part of me that is absolutely that way. Not in this circumstance, no, but in other circumstances. So I stay true to me whilst treating them in a way that has them feeling valued, respected, appreciated, and known. Kath, I trust that's helpful. If I've missed the mark, just let me know and I'll try and add some more clarity. Jesse Malthouse asked, do you define knowledge as power? I would say almost. So there's a really famous quote, I believe it's from Oscar Wilde, and it says, to know and not to do is not to know at all. So I think it's from Oscar Wilde, could be wrong about that. To know and not to do is not to know at all. Good day, Marissa, lovely to have you on the call. There is a bunch of you on the call, guys. Thank you all for joining in. It's wonderful to have you along. Make sure to ask your questions and I'll make this class for you. So knowledge on its own is F all. It's completely meaningless, useless, hopeless, and worthless on its own. Knowledge with the attached action, with the aligned action, is power. So do I believe knowledge is power? No, not at all. Do I believe knowledge plus aligned action is power? Big time, absolutely, and boom. And knowledge is the starting point. So there's a saying, awareness is the start of all change, and of course it is. But awareness on its own is like knowledge on its own. It equates to F all. It doesn't get anyone anywhere. There are a lot of super smart people. There are a lot of bookish, I mean, I'm a human behavioral science geek. I've read a book every couple of weeks for over a decade now. I love this stuff. I consume a lot of books. But there are a lot of bookish people that have not made much of an impact in the world at all and live in a place of self-torment and frustration and wonder why the rest of the buffoons on the planet can't get it right. So knowledge is a great starting point, wonderful and magnificent, and should be honoured and cherished, so long as it's accompanied with aligned action. I trust that answers that for you. Matt Hall. Now, Matt's got a big question here, so bear with me, guys, as I read this one out. It's actually such a big question, it's got the see more button. So that's how big that one was. As a recruiter, I deal with a lot of different people, and I'm essentially a matching service. So matching, Matt's, I guess, saying he's matching a job with a job seeker and an employer, so a three-way match there. How would you rapidly educate others as to where they might be missing the mark with connecting when you are an intermediary and they are not familiar with DiSC? E.g., skills might match, but behaviours, expectations may not. Matt, that is a big question. That's a big question. First of all, advice that hasn't been asked for is rarely well received. So if you're going with this where I think you might be going, tact is so critical, and holding yourself in a way that's both elegant and graceful whilst getting some cut through and impact is the blend that you're wanting to get right. To provide an insight on what you think you know, perhaps the great way to go there is with a question. So you might say something like, I think I might be noticing X. I'm curious, how do you go when it comes to A, B, C? So I think I could be noticing X. I'm curious, how do you think you go when it comes to A, B, C? I'm curious, by the way, is a softener for whatever comes next. So the question that's asked at the end is softened and much more readily received by the listener when preceded with I'm curious or I'm wondering. If you want to soften it even further, you would throw in the word just. just is a minimizer. So when you throw in a softener minimizer combo, the question that gets asked is much, much more gently received by the listener. So yeah, I think that's where you're going, Matt, but ask me a more succinct, punchy question, and I will definitely try and get to that for you. Matt saying sorry. Don't say sorry, mate. Not at all. I'm here to help. Rachel Stenning is watching. G'day, Rachel. Lovely to have you. Thanks, Marcus. That was very helpful, says Kathy. And I guess with rapport and the others will also possibly shift into our energy and meet us halfway. Absolutely. Kat, I want to share with you Pace Pace Lead, which you're possibly familiar with. This comes from the world of NLP, and it suggests that if we pace along with a person, and then on a second occasion pace along with a person, then we can make a behavioural lead, and that lead is highly likely to be followed. So we pace with that person, and then we pace with that person, and then we make a lead, and that lead is highly likely to be followed. What a lot of us do is we just go into an interaction and we lead immediately, and we scratch our heads as to why our behavioural style is not being followed. We've been too abrupt with it. We have not earned the right to lead yet. So the principle in NLP says pace, pace, lead. Pace with your client, and then make a behavioural lead, and that lead is highly likely to be followed. The best way to enunciate this is, Kathy, if you are cruising down a highway and it's an 80-kilometre zone, but you just feel like being a bit risque, maybe you're in high energy and you think, oh, bugger it, I'm going to go 10 k's over the speed limit. Pace, pace, lead would say, cruise along at 80 with them for a while and then accelerate, and they are likely to increase their acceleration as well. So that's a little bit of a metaphor to try and enunciate that concept of pace, pace, lead. Hey, Kylie, cousin Kylie, great to have you on the call. Peter Burns is watching as well. Peter, I always remember Peter for this fantastic saying. He said, we were talking about beliefs one day and how every belief is made up. Every belief is made up. The question with beliefs is, do they work for you or against you? Because they're all made up. And so the question with beliefs is, given that they're all made up, you may as well make up a series of beliefs that serve you and function for you and are good for you, good for others, good for the greater good. Anyway, Peter's comment was, my problem with beliefs, I feel, is that people believe them. And that's it. Some people get so invested in their beliefs that they attach their identity. That's not meant to be phallic, if that's how that's coming across, but people get so attached to their beliefs that they actually place their identity inside the belief. And so someone challenges their belief, which is actually a harmless and kind of meaningless thing to do. It's no big deal. And the person reacts, like freaks out, as though their identity is being questioned. Their identity isn't being questioned, just a belief that they can either hold on to, release, adjust. Be malleable with your beliefs. Date your beliefs. Don't marry them, because you may come across a pocket of education, a pocket of inspiration that changes your beliefs in an instant about really important stuff. So if you're open to this, then you can constantly evolve. If you're closed to it, then you will get shut down. Like you yourself will feel shut down, and you'll feel threatened and challenged by things that come into the environment. Just got a lot of love there in terms of little love hearts popping up on the screen. So perhaps that the content around beliefs resonated with people. So questions. Guys, I've been kicking on now for quite a while. I've actually lost track of the time. There are still 13 of you on the call, and I'm happy to hang out on the call. Nashi says the iceberg is back. The iceberg is back, yes. I draw icebergs in the training, and it's been pointed out to me that the icebergs look a bit suspect. What can I say? They are icebergs. I apologise for what they may look like. I'm sure Freud would have plenty to say about that. So guys, there are still 13 of you on the call. Happy to stick around and serve you guys. Otherwise, I'm going to a camp tomorrow for 4 days in the Victorian wilderness, and we'll be off the grid. And this is kind of like my last little bit of stuff I do before I head away to that camp. But happy to stick around, guys. Happy to continue to ask questions, and I trust this has been valuable. I trust there's been benefit. Just flicking through my notes for those of you that have just joined and wondering why I'm staring off to the side. Trust has been valuable. Trust has been beneficial. And to finish, unless we've got any other questions, to finish on this note, I was once part of a DiSC training, a behavioural profiling training, and we all had this exercise to break up and plan a company barbecue, and those that were at the training would have already heard this story. The results of this were hilarious. all of the D energy type peeps, the behavioural styles that is D, they were popped in one corner, all the I behavioural styles in another, all the S in another, all the C in another. And so, as not to bore the people who have already heard this story, the truncated version is, guys, no one got anywhere with the exercise of planning ahead to this company barbecue, because the Ds were all just arguing over the top of each other. The Is were coming up with all the fabulous music and what the wait staff were going to be wearing and which genres. The C energy piece were very quiet and had all the email blasts prepared, but they hadn't gotten past step one. And of course, the S energy people were just hugging it out and expressing a lot of love and appreciation for each other's suggestions, but again, never really got anywhere. So by the time the exercise was finished, no one got anywhere. What was the point of this exercise? The point was that no quadrant is better than the other. Go back to our tribal ancestry. If you were starting a tribe tomorrow, you would want some D energy eagle type peeps to go out and kill the wildebeest and bring it back to the fire. You would want your I energy type peeps to be the entertainment, to help people's wounds heal through lightness and playfulness and fun and joy. You would want the C energy, the S energy type peeps to be the healers and the glue that binds the tribe together. And you would want the C energy peeps, because without the governance, there's going to be anarchy and there's going to be no measurable way forward. So everyone is incredibly valuable, and you would want one of each quadrant, and then you'd start over, 2 of each quadrant till you had 8 in your tribe, etc. in a perfect world. No behavioural styles better, no behavioural styles worse. Certain behavioural styles are better for achieving certain outcomes. And if you can attach to that, therein lies the essence of the behavioural code. And again, guys, the code is playing out whether you know about it or not. It just makes sense to get educated on it so that you can know about it and leverage it to your advantage. Danny says, amazing value delivered. Thank you, Danny. I really appreciate that feedback, especially from another coach and trainer. So guys, there are no other questions coming through. There are still 12 of you on the call. Last call for questions. If you've got any more, I'll happily cover them off for you. Otherwise, if no other questions come through in the last 30 seconds, thank you so much for the 13 wonderful people that attended the Behavioural Code training a couple of Thursdays ago. Thank you for being on the call today. Maxine says, thanks, Mark. It's been very useful and a great refresher. Maxine, absolute pleasure. And that's actually the main reason I did this class, is to give the people that invested their time and energy on that day a refresher, a reconnection with this valuable information that can help them get better outcomes in the scenarios in life which are important to them. Cool, Matthew Hall, awesome session, Marcus. Thanks heaps for giving us your time. Maddie, you're welcome. I've heard the twins are up in the background, so I'll be going, taking off the jacket and putting on the hoodie and getting into daddy feed mode in a sec. Marissa says, embrace the inner divergent. Do you know what? I'm actually not sure what the word divergent means. So you'll have to educate me on that, Marissa, as you often educate me on stuff. So looking forward to that. Jesse says, doing the test now. Hilarious. Jesse, I know you're a Tony Robbins guy. There is a free test on the Tony Robbins website. That's possibly the one you're already doing. But if not, you can do a free test there. You can also purchase a test which is a lot more content to it than the free ones as well. Jesse says, thanks so much, Marcus. Love listening to you. Thank you, Jesse. Really appreciate that feedback. As a former client, I know we covered this, but we covered it, I don't know, probably a year ago. So I guess for you, it's great to get that refresher as well. And Mike James has not made a comment, but he's just shown up on the call, and that deserves an announcement. So thank you, Mike. Thank you, guys. It's been a pleasure to serve you. Any other questions, just hit me up and I'll make sure you're taken care of. Otherwise, have a cracking finish to your week in sales and in life. I'm going to go away to my camp in the mountains. I'll be off the grid for about 3 days if anyone's trying to get me, and I'll be back in vogue on Tuesday. One more comment, Kath. Thanks, Marcus. That was brilliant. Kathy, thank you for all your contributions. You really drove this class forward with your questions, which were much appreciated. Cheers, guys. Have a wonderful evening.